My name is Allison Van Dyke, and I'm the Executive Director of the Temple of Understanding. And I want to welcome everyone to our Eco Justice for All dialogue series entitled The Soil of Life. This series is an ongoing program of the Temple of Understandings, which is a 62-year-old interfaith organization whose mission is to advocate for interfaith values in the secular setting of the United Nations and as an NGO around the world. Our focus for the past 12 years has been to increase the awareness of religious leaders and actors of our climate crisis and its negative impact on achieving the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, peace, justice, women's health and safety, food sovereignty, and environmental activism. I am so excited today to introduce two pioneers of the organic farming movement, Ray Archuleta and Linley Dixon, about their vision for healing our planet and reversing the impact of climate change. Ray Archuleta is a certified professional soil scientist with the Soil Science Society of America and has over 30 years experience as a soil conservationist, water quality specialist, and conservation agronomist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. That is, as I love these NRCSs, we have to remember all these. During his tenure with the NRCS, Ray served in New Mexico, Missouri, Oregon, and North Carolina. He received an AS degree in Livestock Science from Northern New Mexico College and a BS degree in Agricultural Biology, plus 30 hours of graduate work in soil-related courses from New Mexico State University. He served in the Peace Corps for 2 years in Guatemala as a livestock specialist. After his retirement from the NRCS in 2017, Ray founded Understanding Ag LLC, excuse me, and Soil Health Academy to teach biomimicry strategies and agroecology principles for improving soil function on a national scale. Ray also owns and operates a 150-acre farm near Seymour, Missouri, that he operates along with his wife and family. Linley Dixon is a certified organic vegetable farmer in Southwest Colorado, who she farms with her brother and her husband. She holds a PhD in plant pathology from the University of Florida and a master's in soil science from West Virginia University in organic farming systems. She held a 2-year postdoctorate with the USDA's Systemic Botany and Mycology Laboratory in plant fungal interactions. In 2018, she began the pilot project for Real Organic Project certification program and is now the co-director with Vermont organic farmer Dave Chapman. Real Organic Project is a farmer-led add-on organic certification that certifies farms that foster healthy soils, pasture livestock, and are committed to organic principles across all of their agricultural enterprises. Real Organic provides the transparency that is often lacking in the marketplace and educates eaters about farming practices that will provide for future health. And I think another way that I look at the organic farming, the organic project, is that it assures us that the farmer is not using harmful chemicals on their land. Therefore, you're eating healthy food, not the opposite. So what we're going to do this morning is have a dialogue for about 40 minutes. And then we want to ask everyone to please put questions in the chat. And we'll follow up with a couple of questions from the audience. And we're hoping that you all have great questions, because I always think that's the most fun part of a dialogue. So I want to start out by asking each of you, what are your guiding spiritual or religious principles that motivate your climate-focused work? Linley, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think one thing we all have in common is the mystery of life. And it's something that I've been curious but beyond curious, just really wanting to dive in and know more about. And I think that's why I ended up studying in school so long the tiny, tiny things. So plant pathology is the study of viruses and all the really minuscule things in the soil, and that gets at the heart of how life began. You know, why are we here? How did it get complex? And as a farmer, you get to interact with those natural forces every day, and you get to observe what happens. And so I think being a farmer, being an academic in biology, my spirituality comes from recognizing the beauty, the wonder of why we're all here, and wanting to interact with it and maintain it, keep it alive and beautiful. And I just feel so lucky to be able to be a farmer. There are so many farmers, that young people that want to be farmers, and it hasn't worked out. It's so hard to get started. And I have that story of struggle of, because I didn't have farmland in my family. And so much of wanting to be a farmer is just to be interacting every day with that, the wonder of life and the beauty of it all. And so I did go down the academic pathway for a long time, until I was 30, actually. And I walked out of the lab, and I'd been in an enclosed room all day. You know, I hadn't seen any of the sun that whole day. And so I think farmers just have that wonderful opportunity to interact with the mystery and beauty of it all, enhance it, protect it. And I think in the end, we are able to observe so much of what we do, what we need to do to survive, which is feed ourselves, how that has an effect on the environment. I think as a farmer, we're able to observe that really well, and we need to share what we're observing. So I'll end there and pass it off to Ray.
Wow, Linley, you did such a beautiful tapestry of what kind of some of my experience too. Mine started when I was about 15 years old, working on my uncle's ranch. And I really grew up in town, but I think all of us have this created design to be outside. I think we were designed to be part of the creation. And as I later in my life became a Christian, I started to realize that some of the this Christian values that's really taught in the ancient scriptures has huge amounts of ecology. I don't think people realize that Christianity is really an Eastern culture, was very holistic, and there's a lot of ecology and biology in it. And as I started realizing why I'm here, like Linley said, well, why are you here? And I think the more you get interface with, in my words, God's creation, you realize what you really are, your design. And the sad thing is, there's a lot of young people, like Linley saying, is that can't get into agriculture. They want to be. And I see, as I teach all over the country, and I teach all over the country. I have been in every state, and I've been Canada and Mexico. And there's a common thing. People have this passion to reconnect. And what I love about these new millennials, they want, I have 3 daughters, and they're millennials, and they want purpose. They just don't want a job. They want purpose. And I think there's this movement going on. And I think I'm so excited. It's subtle. It may be small right now, but there's this movement towards regeneration, and people want to regenerate the land. And I tell people, regeneration first starts with you. Your heart and mind have to completely change the way you look at the natural system, how you interface with nature. So for me, it really started with a deep Christian roots of how, in the beginning of my walk and towards Christianity, but also growing up and being around my uncle's ranch, that was really, really had a huge impact. And that's why I think caused me to go to university for 8 years to go to school. So that was part of my journey.
Wonderful, wonderful. As an interfaith organization, we're always curious about how you see the role of people of faith, faith-based traditional religious leaders in addressing the climate crisis. We look at things like advocacy, advancing a moral message, perhaps, on the climate, or practical measures, and like lowering your energy use or things like that. So tell us what do you see as the role of the religious people in this movement you're talking about?
Well, let me tell you, recently I just created a 15-minute trailer called Dominion. And the reason I created that is because I'll be brutally honest, and I say this with humility, is sometimes we have to critique ourselves. And I started realizing that some of the doctrinal teachings that we've been teaching for centuries, like the doctrine of dominion, that we're going to force, and God gave us responsibility to take care of the animals and all the creation, but it was a dominion of love and respect. It was of humility, not like a conquering king that you're going to absolutely force things. And so I really had an issue in how we were interpreting that first scripture in Genesis about dominion and force. That's not what, if you really look at the subtlety of the translation, it was really to come down in humility and be God's viceroy, his emblem, we were supposed to represent him in love and take care of the creatures and the creation. And then the other doctrinal issue that I was having problems with the church, and I still do, is that the doctrine of end times, people in the church is like, well, God's coming, Christ is coming back, he's going to make a new earth. It's kind of like saying, well, you're a renter, let's go ahead and trash the house and destroy it because, well, they're going to build me a brand new house. And I just didn't like that message that was being sent out. And so what I've been working on recently is to be able to bring more illumination to this misunderstanding, which is causing a lot of the Christian community not to be engaged. And I think it's just like, there's a lot of things I was taught in college that were just wrong. I'm just being brutally honest. It was just wrong. Case in point, we can get indoctrinated in our social conditioning in university, at our churches, our local communities. A lot of stuff was just plain wrong. Case in point, when I left college, they told me the only way I could farm is with chemicals and fertilizer control. I have to kill something. Nature's against you, and I have to use pesticides, fertilizers, and chemicals. That's what I was taught. It's all about yield. Wrong premise, wrong result. Not one professor told me, said, no, Ray, your job is to emulate the creation, love it, nurture it, work with it, have an understanding. So, and the reason I bring that up, because I think it's too easy to blame that we get indoctrinated in church, but we get indoctrinated in our own family. We get social conditioning. I call it social conditioning. And it happens in our family, happens in the community. And I'll just say one more thing. One of the biggest problems of spreading regenerative agriculture is social conditioning in the local community among farmers. It's brutal. If you're an organic farmer, you say, what's wrong with you? You're a hippie, something's wrong with you. Social conditioning. So that happens in church, that happens in the university. We just need to understand that humans are really good about social conditioning, keeping you, and as a government employee, I understand social conditioning. Don't you start thinking, don't go outside that little parameter. So I think those are the things, the reason I brought that up, why I think my biggest mission is to create paradigm shift and realize that we build agriculture on the wrong premise. That's my goal.
Wonderful. Linley, what about you?
Ray, I really agree with what you were talking about, the sense of community that religious institutions can instill. And I think that's what the Real Organic Project is trying to do, is bring together the organic farmers across the country, give them a voice. I think many of them thought, good, we've got a national definition of what organic is, we're protected. So now I can go back to my farm and work, and they did that. And as the standards sort of started to slip, they woke up, they saw their farms were in jeopardy, their communities were in jeopardy, and we need to reorganize. We need to come back together, much as the religious community is so good at doing. We need to talk to each other. We need to inspire each other. We can't just farm in our silos anymore. We need to stand up for what we created in the first place, because it was right. And I know I wasn't there, I was baby, but there are so many stories and and they continue to this day. There was an organic farmer whose tractor was shot at by a neighbor. It's just not, as you said, there needs to be a paradigm shift. That we need to find each other in community, and just to directly answer your question, Allison, I think that's what the religious community can demonstrate so effectively is how to work together, how to come together and create change.
Wonderful.
We can't do it alone.
Ray, I just wanted to tell you that for about 10 years, I was a farmer in Vermont. We had a dairy farm, and we worked with the farmers next door who were old timers, and they spread manure on the land, and we did it the old-fashioned way. And I didn't realize it, but we were the laughing stock of the whole community, which was a very dairy-oriented community. They called us hippies and weirdos, and I mean, they were just like, they thought it was hysterical that we didn't spread any of the pesticides on our land. So that sense of social ostracism was really strong.
Oh,
So,
it is.
yeah.
Think about what I have to deal with, ladies. I have to deal with conventional and organic farmers. I deal with both spectrums. And how do I transition farmers from getting away from the chemicals? And I tell my organic farmers, which I love, because they really set, like Linley said, they set the tone that something was wrong with agriculture years ago. And yet I still have a lot of organic farmers till the soil way too much. I said, you guys till too much, no tillers, you spray too much. And so my goal is to teach them how to emulate the natural system. So I'm caught up in kind of like these two worlds. And if you guys remember, there was Sri Lanka was trying to go organic. The whole country was trying to go organic. And it failed on them because, well, one thing is you don't get people off chemicals and fertilizer overnight. My father-in-law he was a chronic smoker and a functional alcoholic. You do not get people off chemical and right away because it'll collapse. Same thing with the soil. So I work them gradually until eventually they get away from all those inputs. And so my goal is to eventually farm like Lily is going down a direction where you don't have to till very much. We have no-till organic farmers now. They're doing a great job, but going down that path takes a journey. And I just want to make this comment because I think it's so important. There becomes a lot of judgment and a lot of critical, again, that social conditioning where we're trying to force people. There's many ways towards down this journey. And I don't know if you know Linley, Brian O'Hara from.
Sure. Yeah.
Brian's one of the better organic no-tillers vegetable growers in the country. He does a great job, but yet among the organic people, he's kind of ostracized in that you can't do that. And same thing with no-tillers and all that. I just started realizing that we're very tribal, and we get into these tribes, and so that exists. I just want that to make us realize that you were looked at as the laughing stock, but that stuff's still going on. That it's very brutal and hard to overcome the social conditioning of the local area.
That brings me to another question that I have, which is, other than the social conditioning, what are the most difficult obstacles that each of you see in the work that you're doing, spreading the word of organic farming? What do you find is really the hardest thing to overcome, other than the ones we've already talked about?
Linley, you go first.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
I think the biggest one is we're all growing the kind of food that everyone wants to eat, and the marketplace knows that, but they're not willing to change their practices. They just want to market to you what they think you want. And so it's the lack of transparency, hands down, the greenwashing. They're better at being us than we are at being us in the marketplace. And so if we can just bring back transparency, I don't even care if we, try to stop that way of farming. CAFO production, I don't think should exist, but I'm never going to get that through. We can try for political change. But if we were fully transparent in the marketplace about what people were buying, if pasture raised really was, actually pasture, there was something to eat there, That's what, the cows were actually living off of, not just, we're outside. Pasture raised needs to be, this is what I'm eating, right? So if we were fully transparent in the marketplace, I just think we would win. So greenwashing, hands down, is our biggest problem.
And I want to add to the fact, to me, it's massive, massive ignorance, not only from the consumer, because it's like, this is the brutal reality is sometimes if you've been around the CAFO, and I have, because I used to design those systems and I embraced that system at one time. The reality is we treat food like the way we feed our animals. It's just something to fatten you up and just to give you energy. There's no love and respect for the food. And I noticed more and more in this country, we just don't have that awesome respect for food and what it takes to get food on the table. I never forgot this one statement that I read and I thought was so amazing. Food should be so nutritious, so delicious, that when you invite family members you do not like, but the food is so good, you might even forgive them. And so I think that was such a cool way of saying, because if you go to Europe and you go to other places, food is more than just nourishment. It's about relationship. It's about community. It's about able to sit down. And what we've treated food in the fast world is that we have commoditized the planet. And so it's become insatiably corrupt. It's all about money. And it's interesting because the organic, like you said, Linley, has lost its way. And I started seeing that gradual, it's about money, money, money. And these big companies have bought up all these labels that reflected that. And now corporate America is involved. Because I really think there's a young group of people, 70% of millennials read labels. They read labels. They want to know what their food's coming from. They don't want junk in it. They don't want a GMO. They don't want all this stuff in it. They want food. And so I think it's ignorance. Money corrupts. Massive ignorance from the people. A majority of the people. If you go drive across this country, the food's wretched. I mean, if you go to a restaurant, you don't even want to eat it. But that's what we've done. And so it's going to take a long time, but it's coming. I think it's coming. I think people and people are coming to us in this regenerative movement says, we want this to happen. And it's going to happen. It will happen.
That leads me to my question for you, Ray. Basically, in the film Kiss the Ground, you said that people have to lead the way. And
Yes.
Linley, the Real Organic Project that you started, basically you're saying the same thing. You're saying that it really depends on the individual farmer to spread the message. So I'm wondering if you could just comment on how effective you feel this method is, given the major impacts of the industrial agricultural world that you have to deal with.
You're going to Linley first?
That's a
Sure.
big question.
You notice I give her the hard ones first.
Yeah. Sorry.
I definitely agree with you. Farmers need to step up because you don't farm in a vacuum, that's for sure. But we can't do it alone. In the 70s, when farmers went to Washington and were dumping manure on the White House lawn, things like that, they lost. I mean, they raised awareness, but they didn't have the eater support with them. And so I would say that we all need to be speaking up. It's farmers noticed it first because they started losing markets. And they said, wait, what are these eggs? Why can't my eggs sell anymore? And, it's CAFO production under the organic label. And then it's kind of passed on into other sectors too of organic. And I think the idea of just tossing it all out is literally, it's a lifespan for all of these farmers, what they created. And that is where all the value in the marketplace is. And so to just say, let's throw it all away. Let's start with a new word. Let's define that word. Let's, get the government to support us in the marketing of what that label means. It's really going back 40 years. And so, so many farmers realized that that's where they had built this. that's what people were looking for in the grocery stores. And so we just need to hold on to it. And sort of telling that story comes from the farmers first, but we need to bring the eaters with us this time, because I think that's where we're going to have the quickest change. And we fought for political change, for policy change, and we're still working down that avenue, but it was going too slow. You know, farmers were going out of business because of the co-opting of the movement. And so to have another lane is what a lot of farmers called it, an add-on label, just to be able to distinguish, like I said, just create transparency in the marketplace and we'll win. But we need to bring the eaters along with us. And, you know, as we tell our stories, they need to understand them too. So the power of the farmer, the individual farmer, but the power of the eater, in which we're all eaters, to come along with us.
One of the things about the Kiss the Ground movie, look, when that came out, you know, I used to think that, to be positive, people say, can one person make a difference? And I'd smile and I'd just to be positive and say, yeah, sure. Yeah, it can. I believe that every one of us, this podcast, whatever we do make a difference. It's like that little butterfly effect. Can the little movement of the wings of a butterfly create a tornado of change? Absolutely. Individual, one heart, one mind at a time. And when that Kiss the Ground movie, I would have never thought that they were following me around, and we got over 10 million views, 1 billion impressions. And we had a lot of blowback over it from the chemical companies, the fertilizer companies, the tillage companies, and all this. And we need to be honest that the reality is our government is the message is it's not going to change with the government. We're going to create a new model. Look, if 12 fishermen in Christ can have 1 billion followers, and they project 3 billion by the year of 2050 in South America and Africa, these uneducated, some educated, but they make change with that passion. Look at Martin King. Look what he was able to do. We're going to see this massive movement, and it's happening right now, where people are saying, you know what, we're done. And it's this construct. But please understand, I was part of that construct. We created this. Farmers got big. It's easy to blame industrial ag for our issues, but think about what happened after World War II. A lot of people started migrating, leaving, and so chemicals and start getting easier to use chemicals and fertilizer, and to skip a lot of steps that we're not supposed to do from an ecological system. But we also have to remember that we've already destroyed our planet in an organic system. Most of the planet was already overgrazed, overtilled. It was deforested. Those were all organic systems. My point was, it was always us, the problem. The people were the problem. It's the way we looked at the systems since the beginning. And so my whole point about bringing up the Kiss the Ground movie was that we had a lot of blowback about, we got caught up in the tools. And see, when I work with farmers in these industrial, I do not approach them about the tools and chemicals and the fertilizer right away. That's not what I do. It'll shut them down in a hat. Please understand, we all came from that, and we saw something was wrong. So it's just being patient and how to teach them and how to bring them with you and create a new model. And I think that's what's happening. I think we're saying it's not about tools, it's about you understanding what the goal is, mimic nature. And I think that's what I get my message across. So I can relate to organic, I can relate to the chemical guys. And guess what? During time, it's going to shift to an organic system. We're slowly getting away from all that. And I think it's going to happen.
Thank you. My story about the chemicals is kind of personal. My brother-in-law died of a very rare cancer, and it wasn't until we all went in and started cleaning up the house and looking around that we found Roundup in the garage. He'd been using Roundup on his little vegetable plot, and nobody knew it. Nobody knew anything about the dangers. And I thought it was amazing that during his entire treatment at Sloan, nobody ever connected Roundup with his problem. Yeah. Even though it's in the literature, when you start to look at it, it's in the literature. But I think, to your point, we've been so indoctrinated And the public has been kept in the dark in ways that it's just, well, it's a really big problem. It's a big problem. And I think you've all articulated that beautifully.
And we have huge farms. I'm telling you that, and nobody likes this, but our farms are too big. Nobody likes that message. And I tell them, you can't manage too big of a farm. I'm sorry. It's too difficult. So we have a human displacement problem. We don't have enough farmers, period. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants to hear that message. And I'm telling you, when you go talk in a large group and you say, well, Ray, what's one of the solutions? Don't farm so many acres. Don't farm so many acres. But what they do is they spread so many acres and they have to maintain so much infrastructure. It's a problem. And so farmers, you imagine some of these 7,000, 8,000 acre farmers are barely making it. They're barely making it. And you would think they were making a lot of money. No, they're maintaining a lot of infrastructure. I call them, you're the poorest millionaires on the planet. You're worth millions, but no cash flow.
That's fascinating. So I want to talk a little bit about youth today, because we run a youth program, a 1-month program where the young people, it's been Zoom since COVID, but young people came to the UN and they were able to go over to the UN and experience what it's really all about. So we've been involved with young people, and many of them have been really very articulate and very adamant about the climate crisis that their generation is inheriting. And so I wonder, I think of things like, let's tell them to do co-ops or something, but Linley, does the Real Organic Project cover young people who don't own their land, who have co-ops? And Ray, what solution do you have to young people to try to encourage them to, well, let's just say in my generation, it was get back to the land, go back to the land. That was the 70s. And we all headed off to farm, and some of us stayed there forever and some of us didn't, but we learned a lot. And it was a profound shift, really, from being against the Vietnam War, whatever, into like, okay, let's do something positive. Let's go farm. So how do we, what message do you all have to young people, and how can we encourage them to get back to that farm and start living a different lifestyle?
We have a group that we certify in California called ALBA, and they are able to get, their mission is to get farm workers owning their own business, farm business. And so it's a cooperative, and the whole thing gets certified organic, but the individual farmers work together on this cooperative. And the idea is they then take their businesses and go based on what they've learned in this cooperative and start their own businesses. And so absolutely, if you farm cooperatively, you can still get certified organic. You can still get certified with the Real Organic Project. And so the price of land these days, the difficulty of getting into markets, co-ops are where it's at. It's really helped our farm survive. It's a way to just distribute a lot of that marketing that farmers aren't necessarily really good at. And so, yeah, I guess your question was, did that answer your question? Can we certify cooperative farming operations? Yes, I think that those types of operations can get certified organic. There's no barriers there. No doubt climate is the environmental issue of our time, and it may be the ending of it all too. I really believe that we are in crisis mode. I don't think, I felt this when I was younger. I don't think scientists spoke up loudly early enough. And so I think we're really in it's now action, and young people know this. And farming absolutely has to be part of the solution. Carbon dioxide lasts for over a century in our atmosphere. And so everything we've already emitted is going to be up there, even if we cut emissions right now, for 100 years as a greenhouse gas. So we have to draw down. It has to be part of the solution. And farming is absolutely the way to do that. I am really nervous that our climate dollars from our government are not going to the right type of farming right now. It's really concerning to me. I know No-till has become this gold standard for how we farm for climate, but we're not talking about the fertilizers that are going on no-till production, the herbicides that are allowing no-till to be so successful. Organic farmers, actually, the best organic farmers in the country are growing cover crops over our heads, flail mowing it and incorporating as tillage. And that happens once a year, but all of that organic matter goes into the soil. And these farms are no input farms. And that's something that the regenerative movement and organic farmers have in common, which is a desire to stop inputs. And every input has an awful climate story. If you look at the production of these inputs, no matter what, whether it's an organically approved input on that national list, if we're talking climate, there's mining involved, there's the production of whatever that fertility has a climate impact, and it's not one that we're going to want to know. I mean, there's a lot of information that comes with every input. There's a story there. You talked about sort of the ignorance of the public. You wish that we had an ability for everybody to know these stories, and it's almost overwhelming. So if we can just get out that we are looking for no input or low input farming, that is such a beautiful climate story, because we really are trying to figure out how to stop consuming so much. And if you're a farmer that's bringing in a lot of inputs, that's consumption. We all have to eat. We can stop shopping, but we all have to eat. So we're going to have to figure out, how to find food in a climate friendly way. I'll let Ray respond there.
Linley, beautiful. I think people don't realize, like, to make 1 ton of fertilizer, you use copious amounts of natural gas, carbon. I tell people, is your farm running on new sunlight or ancient sunlight? Ancient sunlight, it's diesel, natural gas, all those. And people don't talk about it. I have some organic no-tillers, 7,000 acres, roll cover crops down. That's their weed suppression. And so I see us going to, like what Linley's talking about, a low, notice the word, low input, low disturbance, chemical or physical systems. That's where we get away from all these, I call it products of ancient sunlight, pesticides, fertilizer, copious amounts of energy, like she's talking about. We can't do that anymore. That system won't work. What's going is, here's my thing that I'm pushing. And it's something very quick. Most people don't realize that close to 38% of our planet is bare ground, bare soil. That's reflecting sensible heat and has altered the small water cycle. What I'm trying to get farmers, let's cover, if I had one practice right now for all farmers, cover crops, cover the land, and have those plants cool the soil surface, draw the carbon down, and create habitat, and do all these benefits, these ecosystem services that plants do. But I just got back from Chihuahua, Mexico in October. I've been there 4 times. We have a rancher that has restored the desert back into prairie by biomimicry, mimicking the buffalo. We can fix our deserts. We can heal our deserts. I've seen it with my own eyes. And so if I have one practice right now, and they say, Ray, you only have one practice and all the money focused on this, cover the land. When I drive from California all the way to North Carolina, and I go in the fall and the spring, guess what I see? Bare soil. The land's not covered. I don't think people understand that Saudi Arabia was once vegetated. They found elephant tusks on the bottom of those sands. Our planet was vegetated. So we're losing all this vegetation. So I think what's happening is we have a disrupted small water cycle. And yes, we have too much legacy carbon up the system, but let's cover the land. Can you imagine if we drove from California all the way to Vermont and the land is covered in the fall and the spring? Can you imagine how huge that would be? Simple. One thing, I'll wrap up this. I've learned being with the government, it can't do too many things right. If we can do just one thing right now, cover the land. I would go back into a dirt nap and fed by the microbes. And if we can cover the soil, I'm good. We are Will I ever get everybody to organic? Probably not. Would I love to? Yeah. But right now, let's cover the ground. That's my take.
Wonderful. So we're going to open it up to questions, but I don't see too many questions. But hopefully, some of you on the call will put a few questions in here. But I want to ask each of you to just give me like one quick thing that every individual can do who's not necessarily a farmer, but all the people who are going to be watching this. I mean, what one piece of advice would you give to them?
I'd say educate yourself. And it's actually really fun to do that because there's Kiss the Ground. There's so many fun videos out there that at the end of the day, and you're exhausted and you don't want to open a textbook, you can watch so many educational videos. Real Organic Project has a symposium every year. All of that footage is available free online. There's wonderful videos just on our homepage about the importance of soil health, about raising animals on pasture, and getting to know your farmers. There's Know Your Farmer videos, and I think that these are really entertaining and educational. And then spread the word. So educate yourself and then inspire others with the knowledge that you've gained to be like you. I had a friend who just got rid of plastic, right? That was like her one thing. I'm going to get rid of plastic. And it inspired me to do the same thing. So I think when we have people around us, sometimes it's like, oh, how would I ever get rid of plastic? It's everywhere. And you don't even realize that it's possible. Yep. So yeah, live what you've learned too, and then others come.
Yep. Linley said it so beautifully. It's being conscious, understanding. That's what it's called, the temple of understanding. Educate yourself so that you understand and apply all these things. Educate yourself and plant a garden. Oh my goodness. Go start with a little garden. Touch it, feel it, be engaged. I totally agree. I think Linley did such a good job. We'll just take care of it there. Education. Educate yourself.
Great. Well, that's one of the things that the Temple of Understanding has been doing, is putting this out there in every possible way. We have the Eco-Justice Dialogue series, and we also have a forum that we've done every year, which brings together all kinds of voices about this subject. So I think we all have resources. The question is probably more around what you talked about, Ray. How do we get through to people whose mindsets are just not open?
They're not.
How do we deal with that?
Here's what I've learned. I stopped playing God. I realized I dropped seed. I don't change hearts, and I do not change the heart and mind. I drop seed. And Linley said it beautifully. Let's live it in a community, and they watch. Even though the neighbors are saying, oh, that person's strange, but the crops look so good and are happy, they start to look, they start to question. I just dropped seed. The moment I started to just realize I can't change people's hearts and minds, I can only live it, share it, I started to relax. And then the way you communicate, it starts to be a lot more gentle. There's a lot more loving. You don't try to force. I had a lot of young people come to me and says, how do I get my dad to do it? I said, you can't. And they're in a farming community. And sometimes I say it takes somebody outside to bring that message and be ready for it. But I think you always have to be very cautious that you don't try to force it. And the best way, like Linley said, is live it. And I think that's that's the whole, I think, the nexus of the change.
Wonderful. So I'll start with a couple of these questions that are beginning to come in, and thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. How might the big drought in the Southwest impact the more localized farming in other states?
Well, we're both from the Southwest, so we've got good answers, probably. The big thing that jumps out to me is, why are we feeding the nation from these drought regions? So if we would learn to feed ourselves, we wouldn't depend it wouldn't be so stressful on the water table, figuring out irrigation water to feed the world from the desert. So we need to stop doing that. I'll kind of interact more, but let Ray talk here. I have a lot to say on it.
Well, we both. I think it's beautifully said. I hate that that saying, we got to feed the world. No, we got to teach the world to feed itself. And we can do that. I grew up in the Southwest. I designed those irrigation systems. And what's really going on is the New Mexico, Colorado, all those areas, some of those areas were prairies. They were once vegetated. Our family's been there for 400 to 500 years. It used to be a prairie. If you drove all the way from Albuquerque all the way down to the Chihuahuan Desert, it was grassland. Now it's bare ground. Think about all that bare ground that's reflecting heat. Does it matter the way we farm? Absolutely. Again, once we realize that everything's connected, that we're giving off way too much sensible heat. We're reflecting huge amounts of heat from millions of square miles, and it's pushing the rain clouds away. So we have a disrupted water cycle. It's not just carbon, it's a disrupted water cycle that we have. And the West is becoming more and more desertified because we just, the planet can no longer regulate itself. I have one quick statement to say that. Look, imagine for a split second, audience, take plants out of the earth. If we took every tree, every grass, every shrub, every tropical forest, what would the planet be? You're right, ice. It would be dead. Is it possible that we just have devegetated the planet so badly that it can no longer regulate itself? I don't think people realize you cannot have climate without plants. And so I think I have to speak that simply because I'm not smarter than a fifth grader. I'm talking to myself, because once you take it down to that level and drive the whole West, it's bare. I drive that, Nevada, California, bare desert soils. They were all vegetated. So it's not just carbon. We have to realize the way we farm and ranch is impacting the climate globally. And I think it's quicker. I think we can get a quicker response by revegetating the planet personally and doing the other things we're supposed to do.
Excellent. So I have an interesting question here from Ivor. It's all about yield, and that's the problem. Can we produce sufficient food to feed our growing population with organic techniques?
Yes, absolutely yes. I have a young farmer in North Carolina. Last year, he won the soybean award for North Carolina. He's no-till, rolls covers, and he grew those soybeans, and he's getting less and less chemicals. And he went from 5 chemicals down to 1 chemical. He's getting away from all these chemicals and just rolling 114 bushel soybean. 100. He set the yield contest for North Carolina. This year, he expects to have 335 bushel corns. So why am I telling you that? Here's what I'm saying. There's people walking down this journey heading towards regenerative. When I say regenerative, towards regenerative organic, where we're heading down that direction. I hear a lot of people saying that that regenerative organic they don't yield well. That's not true. And it depends on it really bases on the management. But we have some producers doing great yields, and they're using less and less chemicals all the time. In fact, they're getting away from these chemicals and yet yielding more. So I think we can. I think we can feed the world, but I don't think we can do it in the current model. It's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to look at farm viability too. If you spend so much money on all of these external inputs, then your farm isn't as viable. It's not as resilient, because if you have a catastrophe, you've put in so much to every season. So it's really better for the farmer to look at gross, or not to look at gross, but to look at net. So, farmers like to brag about their yields, but then they don't talk about how much they spent to get those. And when the organic farms keep coming back and they're successful, that's probably the way to bring in more people, is, because these farms are surviving, because their costs aren't as high on inputs.
And we're integrating animals now into our cropping systems. And so we didn't, I don't think I answered the thing. How do we bring young people back in? Some farmers do not want grazing animals, and they shouldn't have them, because it's a skill set by itself. But there's a lot of young people that love animals. They take care of the animals, come work with the producer, and they run the grazing system within the cropping system. That's happening. And I see more and more of that happening, because I love integration of animals because nature doesn't farm without animals. And so that's one of the things we're doing more in organic systems. We're bringing more grazing into these systems where you can integrate both. And I'm really excited about that.
It's a way for the farmer to profit from those years where they were just growing fertility, growing cover crops.
Absolutely. I love cattle and sheep allow a huge opportunity for healing, like you're talking about, and still make money on it. Great way for young people to come in.
That's wonderful, because a lot of, well, you can imagine, we talk with a lot of religious leaders, and so many of them insist that a vegetarian diet is the only solution. And I keep saying to myself, well, I don't know, because when I had a farm and we had cattle, they were able to make that soil so good. And what would I have done without them? How do you actually, you need to balance this out, is what I'm trying to say. Fine, eat less, but to just make everybody have no animal feed whatsoever, no meat, no anything like that. I don't know. It's just one of my pet peeves. But anyway, I'm obviously running against the grain of many religious traditions. So,
well, Allison,
let
me tell you something. Yeah, let me tell you something. I've made this statement. We're not going to heal the deserts and turn them back to prairies without animals. It's not going to happen. And I've seen it with my own eyes. And in fact, the next Kiss the Ground movie is going to be called Common Ground. Alejandro Carrillos is going to be one of the major persons where you're going to see the footage of deserts coming back into prairies. And you cannot do it without grazing animals. They didn't plant it. They didn't reseed it. They move the cows like buffalo. And he moves those cows 800 times a year. And you should see the weather. He's getting more rain now. He's changed his local climate. I am telling you, I never had so much hope until I came back from that ranch. And they only get 6 to 10 inches of rain a year.
Wow.
So if they can do this in the Chihuahuan Desert, I say we can heal the planet. We can do this. So I don't want to hear excuses anymore, because they said, well, I don't have time. I don't have to bring animals and blah, blah, blah. The reality is we don't understand, and we're not committed, and we don't understand. And so when I came back, this is my 4th time from Chihuahua, 4th time.
Wow.
So we're going to be very excited about the next Kiss the Ground movie, where actually farmers and ranchers that are bringing, and like Linley, they're actually healing the land. And this movie's going to be about them and how they're actually doing that.
Fantastic. Oh, that makes me feel so good.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's common sense, but you're up against the whole sort of religious tradition in a lot of ways. So,
oh yes.
What do you do? So here's another one. How can we stand against the forces that push for GMO soybeans, promoted as more resilient under climate change? How can that be resisted?
Young farmers that are doing non-GMO, by the way, that yield, the high yields of corn and that, were all non-GMO. That is the biggest joke I've ever heard, that you got to do GMO. No, you don't. And people don't want it. And so that young farmer used non-GMO corn and soybean to get those high yields. You got to remember that farmers are, why they push yield, because they have to maintain such huge infrastructure. And so they've been brainwashed. And so we have young farmers that are not using those GMOs and getting fantastic yields. I think and I was opposed initially with my friend Russell about pushing yield. He was doing it because he wants to prove that regenerative systems with less inputs can do better than the current model. And he's proved that. So that's exciting.
I feel like I need to just chime in with a red flag that I don't think any movement has been harder on the organic movement than the non-GMO movement, because there's a label out there that everybody loves because it looks so beautiful with an orange butterfly, but that is chemical farming. And so I just want everybody to be aware of that it's often just put on products where there is no genetically modified alternative. So it's just a way of greenwashing again. And so that's one that the consumer just needs to get educated on.
Yep.
Because that product is the same as a chemical product most of the time.
Yep. Yep. Totally agree.
So I'm going to throw another question at you that's a little different than the way you've discussed how you are functioning and growing this movement. Any thoughts on the political activism that we need to change the government subsidies? And how do we promote regenerative farming rather than the industrial model? And I think this person is talking about political activism, which is a very different area than what you've been talking about. But do you find anybody doing that, being successful? Are you supporting anyone in that area?
Yep. Yep. I'm going to start off. I've learned not to be tribal. What do I mean? Not Republican, not Democrat. This is not about, it's not about being a part of that tribe. It's part of being of the human tribe, to realize that this is impacting all of us. And so how you communicate to my conservative brothers and sisters, I communicate very differently and draw them in. Same thing with my other side of the, let's be honest with the Kiss the Ground group. When I first heard them, they said they wanted to come with me and film me. And I said, if you're going to come, I said, please, when you talk to farmers and ranchers, let's do it with humility. Let's do it with humility, whatever group you're talking to, and reach them from where their vantage point is. And I've learned more and more to communicate from that perspective. And then guess what happens? The beautiful thing happens, because the first thing is most people say from the conservative, we don't have global warming. Oh, really? I said, do you know that, if you notice that, and even whatever political, farmers are beginning to realize something's really wrong with the weather. So I start talking from the plant and really make it really simple. And they go, oh, I never thought about that way. But see, what happens when you went to the far left group, they started saying, well, cow farts are causing this problem. Well, that sounded really ridiculous. And when you talk like that, you have these very, very far polarized groups. But then when you start talking and make it very simple and communicate, and you start talking to them in humility, all of a sudden they go, well, I wasn't aware of that. And they start to think on their own. But my point is, the moment you start getting either one of those tribes, I say, learn how to communicate with both groups. And I'll be honest, with the Democratic Party, it tends to be a lot more already leaning towards the resources and caring for the planet. When I talk to my conservative brothers and sisters, I draw them in, and I said, and because they also do. Well, I go on a lot of conservative farmers of farms, and they care, but sometimes they just didn't realize what they were doing with their tools of chemicals and fertilizer were harming and tillage. They didn't know, and that's because of our educational system, what we picked up. So, I guess what I'm saying, just be very cautious how you approach both groups.
I have extreme concern that we are already funding climate money towards things that are making the climate worse. We're already making mistakes. This idea that you can offset, your pollution by buying some hypothetical place that's sequestering carbon, that's insane. That's not going to work. Climate smart came out of the chemical industry. So they have power in the government, and so the first $1 billion that went towards climate smart agriculture is chemical farming. And so people who have money and power are going to go after these climate dollars, and they already are winning. So we need to educate ourselves on what climate smart means, who invented that term, who's going to benefit from that term. And yeah, it's not. We are fiddling while Rome burns for sure right now, and fooling ourselves into thinking that these programs are going to be anything other than more of the same.
How more frustrated than a person that worked for NRCS had to implement these programs. I totally agree with you. And when they started wanting to pay farmers for carbon, I got so upset. I said, it's not about carbon. I said, carbon's important. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But carbon can be a gas phase, liquid phase, solid phase, all at one time. Carbon is very complex. And you're going to pay farmers for carbon? I said, why don't we just pay farmers to make it green? It's easy to verify. Take a satellite. I want vegetation. Let's cover the planet. And you're right. I see these carbon as kind of like a Ponzi scheme. and you're paying farmers and you're going to pay these guys to do this. I don't want that. We don't look. Dr. Lyle from Ohio State talking about paying farmers $100 an acre just to make it cover. Let's cover the soil. And we can get rid of a lot of these farm programs that are not effective. I've been doing this for 30 years. Our agency's been around for 87 years and we're still having these issues. And she's right. We've spent billions, trillion. And look where we're at. We're still having massive wind erosion and our waters are polluted. 87 years. I agree with Linley. It's just going to be another way of spending money and it's not going to get anything done.
This has been an amazing discussion, and thank you both so much. Obviously, we could go on forever, and hopefully we will continue in some way with this kind of discussion, because we do need to start educating people, and in the right way, as you said, with love and care.
And
it's
humility,
very important. And humility. Yeah. So anyway, thank you both so much. I'm just going to quickly put in a little bit of a push for our next program, which is the Temple of Understanding's Science, Spirituality, Solidarity, Weaving Interconnections for Change. This is our forum 2022, our third forum, and our keynote is Dr. Vandana Shiva with Bill McKibben, who are going to give us an overview of our world now. We have two panelists, one on trees and soil, and another on oceans and waterways. And this is not to be missed. We hope all of you will join us, and just look for our e-blast and sign up for October 20th from 10 to 12. Thank you both so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.